Of oil, that has to be, the big wild card as well, and whether or not we see a recovery in the price of oil or whether it goes even lower.
Yeah.
Are you on a certain side of the fence here?
So oil can go up in the short term. It can go up and down a little bit, but I think actually, I think I mentioned this last time I was on the show, that I think there's some political motivations here at play, and I think
against Russia.
Well, I think Russia and Iran initially, but also I think against the shale sector in the US. The Saudis are at risk of losing their position as the marginal setter, the price setter, and I don't think they want to lose that position. So I think if in the course of making life difficult for Russia and Iran, you also end up making life very difficult for the US shale sector, why not? So I think the Saudis will I think, potentially carry on. And, I've kind of thought, in my head...
Carry on as in not increase production ceilings?
I think production will remain high. I also think it's a demand issue. I think this idea it's all about supply, I think, needs to be reassessed at some point. It will be. I think there's a demand issue here as well. But I suspect, for me, my kind of in my head target is 30-35 as where we could get to.
30-35?
Yeah.
Wow. Long way to go.
Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Greene. You're tuning into AMTV Alternative Media Television. It's Monday morning, and personally I got a jam-packed day, so I just got out of the shower. The hair's all over the place. Deal with it. Again, I've got a very tight schedule today. It is Martin Luther King's birthday, and isn't that fantastic, people? Yeah, let's celebrate Martin Luther King, all the great things he did, even though it's likely that the U.S. federal government and the CIA whacked him. Yeah, that's right. Martin Luther King's own heirs, his own family, thinks it was the CIA that killed him. Tried to frame him. He, of course, had extramarital affairs. This was all very likely and all pretty well known by now. It's amazing the American people don't know any of this information. In fact, the CIA tried to blackmail him into committing suicide. And this is all something we celebrate in the United States of America. It's amazing that the Ferguson rioters and protesters aren't protesting for legitimate causes like this. The government whacking, supposedly, Martin Luther King Jr. But again, nobody gives a shit. And this is a shortened week for the financial markets. I've talked about this exclusively on AMTV. The oil markets, with oil and the commodity implosion, oil specifically dropping over 60% in just a couple of months in the build up to war with Russia. We, of course, have a couple very important meetings this week. On Thursday, the ECB, Mario Drag Queen gets together. They're going to launch a new multi-trillion-dollar stimulus package. Now, I personally think this package will underwhelm. For example, if they don't announce $1 trillion and it's only half $1 trillion, $500 billion, the market could sell off dramatically. If they offer $1 trillion in this fakery, in this shenanigans, this continuation of the policies of QE till infinity that we've had in the States, then it could be a very high move to the upside. But there's another lesser known meeting that people aren't paying attention to that I would argue has far more influence than the ECB meeting does. And that's the meeting in Davos, Switzerland. Davos, Switzerland, the Swiss Alps that is coinciding and overlapping with the meeting at the ECB. It starts one day prior. People like famed short sellers and hedge fund managers like George Soros, people like Bill Gates, world leaders and global leadership and celebrities get together in Davos, Switzerland to discuss their future, to discuss the collapse of the dollar, to discuss war with Russia, and to discuss what will happen when China finally depegs, so to speak, from the U.S. dollar. Note that the Swiss franc depegged ahead of the ECB meeting, as if the ECB, Mario Drag Queen, gave a wink to the Swiss people and the franc. They, of course, had been pegged to the euro for some time now. I think it was $1.20 to the euro, but decided to just throw in the towel and do what investors are reluctant to do, and to depeg itself, causing rapid appreciation of some 30% in a few milliseconds. They would rather cut their losses now than continue to have their currency pegged to the euro before they launch QE. You see, when QE is launched in Europe, the Swiss would be obligated to buy all those worthless bonds, buy all that worthless debt to ruin their own currency. So they decided just to take a hike, to get the hell out of there. Something I think other countries, notably the pigs nations, Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, Spain, etc., will be doing in the not too distant future as well. We also have the Greece elections coming at the end of this month with the likely Syriza party, which is an anti-austerity and anti-bailout party, likely not just to win, but potentially may in fact leave the European Union at some point, creating all of this global instability. You see, what's important about the Swiss franc, what's important about these meetings, it's a microcosm and it foreshadows what's going to happen to the US dollar. Just like the Swiss franc out of nowhere decided to depeg itself from the euro and cause this rift in the markets, this seismic event, the same thing's going to happen here in the United States when the Chinese and the yuan and the BRICS nations decide to depeg themselves, so to speak. For those of you in the know in the currency markets, the renminbi, the official currency of the Chinese, has been pegged to the US dollar since, I believe, 1995. Then it went off its peg and then went back on its peg unofficially throughout the 2008-2009 crisis. It's now a floating currency. It trades in a very thin margin, a very thin range in relationship to other currencies like the dollar and a basket of other global currencies. But at some point, and the People's Bank of China has telegraphed this to the American people in the world, but nobody's paying attention, they're going to leave that free float. They're going to leave that narrow margin and let it to really float away from the dollar. It's exactly why they've been setting up these bilateral agreements Russia has with China. It's exactly why Putin has put his foot down. He's let the ruble collapse. He's letting his people suffer. He is showing sheer force to the American people right now. They are moving away from this petrodollar relationship that has priced oil for years now, that has made up the sovereignty of the United States, that has made up the economic powerhouse of the West. You know, these propaganda films with Bradley Cooper that are out now on Chris Kyle to promote the illegal occupations and wars in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. That's what I'm talking about, folks. So we have an extremely volatile, violent, potentially weak, not just in financial markets, but the shenanigans of the world's elite, the George Soroses, getting together and planning their next move, planning how to handle all this, planning how the Ukraine war will escalate in the spring when things warm up a little bit. Again, all of this economic warfare is leading to real and legitimate war. And the American people and Europeans need to wake up to it. All this fakery, all these shenanigans, all this QE into infinity, at some point, the American people are going to have to pay the piper. Europeans are going to have to pay the piper. It's going to be you and your family that suffers, while these scumbags at the tippy-top echelon of our societies sail off into the sunset. I mean, they're already properly diversified. They've already structured their portfolios into real assets, but not the little guy, because the little guy is blinded by this mainstream media bullshit machine. They don't even know the truth about MLK, Martin Luther King Jr., somebody, honestly, I personally admire, but people don't know the truth about him. He was likely whacked by his own government. It tells you something, folks. You can't trust your own government. I'm Christopher Greene. Get it out everywhere. Make it viral. Hard hitting it in your face. And click the link below to support our sponsor.